We're at Soho House, Toronto, which is basically TIG headquarters for me. I write my stories here, I take my meetings here, and it's kind of amazing because all over the world, if I'm traveling, Soho House can still be home base.
You'll make yourself cry.
Oh, I can do that so well. Oh my God, it's crazy. You're like, Megyn, one tear, left eye, go. Give me 3 seconds.
One tear, left eye, go. Give me 3 seconds. Well, that's exactly what she did.
Meghan Markle stood before a crowd at a memorial, her expression solemn, her head bowed, and then, the moment that sent social media spiraling, a single tear rolled from her left eye.
They really are tragedy ghouls. Tragedy ghouls.
One tear, perfectly timed, perfectly placed, and perfectly caught by the waiting photographer positioned right at her feet. It wasn't just the image that stirred controversy, but what came next. Viewers noticed that her grief seemed to evaporate the second the photographer turned away. No more tears, no trace of anguish, just composure.
Trained in front of her, crying. But it wasn't a real cry. This is one tear, left eye, go. And this is what I find so grim.
As if the moment of sorrow had been turned off like a light switch. Critics didn't hold back. Tragedy ghoul, they called her. A woman accused of using her friend's deepest heartbreak, the death of Kelly McKee, Zijfan's 9-year-old son, for good publicity. To them, it wasn't empathy. It was performance art. And perhaps what made it sting even more was that Meghan herself once admitted how easily she could cry on demand. Long before she was a duchess, in a clip filmed at Soho House, Toronto, she laughed as she described her acting skill. One tear, left eye, go. Give me 3 seconds. The same words echoed across the internet again this week, like a cruel prophecy fulfilled.
I mean, I don't think there's anything worse, there's anything lower. But that is absolutely what happened. It is why Harry and Meghan are now being branded tragedy ghouls. And I mean, watch the crying for yourself and see if you think this is real.
Inspired by how you use your voices to lift others, how you lead with empathy, and how your compassion sparks action.
One tear, left eye, go. The same side, the same tear, the same timing. For critics, that was all the proof they needed. To them, it wasn't just about a memorial. It was about image control, about using tragedy to reclaim a narrative slipping through her fingers.
According to Taz posted on this, how utterly vile to be stood there fake crying with a photographer at your feet to capture the moment. He's not taking pictures of other people at the memorial. He's got his lens solely on Meghan. All she does is perform. They are both gross, every camera click.
After weeks of headlines suggesting her marriage to Prince Harry was in turmoil, the couple appeared suddenly affectionate, tactile, smiling for cameras, as if their public warmth could erase the chill rumored behind palace doors. But the performance didn't convince everyone. Online, users dissected every photo, every hand gesture, every distance between them. Their body language screams, "We hate each other," one viral post read. Another mocked the effort. No matter how many times Meghan claims, "See, he loves me," it's damage control. Watch the divorce clock.
I mean, we hate each other. No matter how many times Meghan Markle claims back with "See, he loves me" posts. TikTok, watch that divorce clock. And there was a lot of it this week. I mean, lots of people also questioning whether it was appropriate.
And yet, Meghan pressed on. At the same event, she posted a photo of Harry hugging a 12-year-old girl, captioned, "Our other favorite Lily." But critics pounced again. Where were her own children? Why, they asked, were they invisible yet again, absent from events that celebrated family and compassion?
Harry hugging a 12-year-old with the caption, "Our other favorite Lily," even though, of course, her children remained invisible and, as far as we're aware, didn't attend the event. The Royal Grift also pointed something out, which I found quite fascinating, writing Meghan hates Harry on their own Archewell public charity website. She cuts his face off. And there's the evidence of that. So, Brittany, of the Royal News Network, this was an event.
The post felt, to some, like another PR stunt. Emotionally charged, visually crafted, and conveniently symbolic. Even those once sympathetic began to turn. Online commentators noted that Meghan had cut Harry's face off in photos used on their official Archewell charity website. Others noticed the same pattern in her social media. Harry fading further into the background as Meghan's personal branding grew sharper and more independent. But this wasn't just about one event. Behind the spectacle lay a deeper crisis, the slow unraveling of what once seemed a royal fairy tale. For all their talk of independence, Harry and Meghan's entire brand still relied on the royal aura they claimed to reject. Without their titles, what were they? In Hollywood, where relevance changes faster than fashion seasons, the Sussexes were running out of angles. That's what made the fake tears moment feel like a turning point. It wasn't just tasteless, critics argued. It was desperate. A bid for attention from a couple increasingly defined by controversy rather than purpose. Even Meghan's supposed allies began to sound uneasy. Commentators noted that while the memorial should have been about Kelly McKee-Zajfan's loss, it had turned into the Harry and Meghan show. Cameras followed Meghan's every move, ensuring that her face, not the grieving mother's, became the image the world remembered. And when it came to motives, the speculation was brutal. Some said Meghan used the moment to reposition herself publicly after damaging reports about her marriage and her fading influence in Hollywood. Others accused her of hijacking her friend's tragedy to reignite empathy from the public. One thing everyone seemed to agree on, the display looked staged. Observers noted that even in group photos, Meghan appeared distant, subtly leaning away from Harry while maintaining just enough physical contact to suggest unity. To some, it was a symbolic performance, affection for the cameras, avoidance in the details. Her tears, one commentator said, weren't for the lost child. They were for the loss of her title. And that title, the Duchess of Sussex, remains the foundation of her identity, even in exile. For Meghan, critics claimed every appearance, every photo, every carefully orchestrated emotion was about maintaining that image. Without it, her Hollywood story would crumble. And yet, the harder she tried to protect it, the more transparent the performance seemed. Because even her closest allies began to sense the cracks. The Hollywood charm, the perfectly rehearsed compassion, the inspirational speeches, it was all starting to look like a loop. The same recycled messages, the same polished delivery, the same hollow words. To many, Meghan's public image had become a brand without a soul, an influencer's blueprint for empathy, performed on cue. But what followed would deepen that perception even further. While Meghan tried to reclaim the spotlight through authentic appearances and emotional photo ops, her carefully constructed PR machine was beginning to falter. Her team, insiders claimed, was scrambling. No clear direction, no solid strategy, just a desperate push to stay visible, to flood the public space with Meghan Markle's name until something, anything, stuck. And that's when whispers began emerging from behind the scenes. Reports of strained relationships, rejected advice, and a growing sense of chaos in her personal PR camp. The world was watching, and Meghan's every move was starting to look like a game without a plan. It was supposed to be her reinvention, the comeback moment that would silence every critic, restore her Hollywood credibility, and remind the world that Meghan Markle was still a force to be reckoned with. But instead, what unfolded looked less like a strategy and more like a slow-motion implosion. Behind the glossy photos, polished interviews, and choreographed appearances, insiders described a woman and a brand completely adrift. Insane, thoughtless, and directionless, one source called it. Meghan, they said, was spiraling. Every new public move looked like an attempt to fix the last disaster, and each attempt only created a fresh one. According to a report from the Daily Mail's Alison Boshoff, Meghan's team was desperately trying to craft her next big moment. But it wasn't Vogue calling, it was Harper's Bazaar. She'd been quietly negotiating to appear on the magazine's cover, hoping to reset her image and reintroduce herself to the fashion elite. The problem? There was no product to sell, no new project to promote, and no narrative to anchor the feature. It was exposure for exposure's sake, publicity as a survival instinct. Industry insiders found it baffling. One described her PR team as throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. She was photographed at a Paris fashion show one week, then at a Fortune conference in Washington the next, trying to be a fashion icon and a corporate visionary at the same time. But with nothing to announce and no clear purpose, every appearance felt hollow. It was branding without substance, ambition without direction. And for someone so concerned with image, the inconsistency was lethal. Was she the soft domestic figure baking jam in Montecito? The polished humanitarian addressing powerful women panels? Or the Hollywood socialite chasing magazine covers? The answer seemed to shift weekly, as though she herself no longer knew who she was trying to be. Even within her own circle, the confusion was palpable. Those close to the Sussexes admitted privately that they were not being discerning about her public image. They weren't protecting her from overexposure or from her own impulses. Meghan, it seemed, was running her own show and ignoring professional advice along the way. The result was chaos dressed up as confidence. Critics called it content vomit, a flood of appearances, interviews, and photo ops all released at once, none connected by a coherent theme. Meghan had become her own brand of noise, and instead of elevating her, the overexposure began to erode the mystique she valued most. Her supporters insisted she was still redefining her voice, but even her speeches began to sound recycled. At events like Fortune's Most Powerful Women, she repeated the same 6 talking points about compassion, female leadership, and self-discovery, delivered with the same scripted rhythm that once inspired admiration, but now drew eye rolls. She was, as one observer put it, a woman performing authenticity. And Hollywood was starting to notice. At a high-profile vegan dinner hosted by Emma Grede, Meghan tried once again to position herself among Los Angeles' elite female founders. The event should have been a moment of triumph, but the reception was brutal. Critics like The Telegraph's William Sitwell mocked the dinner as the most grotesque display of vanity in history, calling it a self-congratulatory echo chamber of wealthy women congratulating each other for existing. Sitwell's words cut deep, describing the night as vacuous, tasteless, and shallow. Even though Meghan wasn't the host, her presence dominated coverage, just as it had at the memorial. Her speeches about empowerment were called empty platitudes, her gestures rehearsed, her charisma manufactured. Commentators like Royal News Network's Brittany pointed out the irony. Meghan loves talking about purpose, but everything she does screams validation. Her so-called business empire had yet to produce anything tangible. Her Netflix projects were stalling, and her media presence was reduced to social appearances and influencer-style branding. It was a damning portrait of a woman caught between worlds, too royal for Hollywood, too Hollywood for royalty, and even her inner circle began to fracture. The next headline came not from a rival or critic, but from one of her closest friends, makeup artist Daniel Martin, the man who had defended her for years. When Martin posted a behind-the-scenes video from Paris showing Meghan's Fashion Week look and playful banter, the clip vanished within hours. Insiders revealed the reason. Meghan herself ordered it deleted. She considered it a breach of trust. Nothing about her public image could be shown without approval, not even by a friend. When Meghan says delete, you delete, an insider told The Sun. Those who knew her best said she treated her image like a luxury brand and controlled it with the precision of a monarch. But her reaction backfired. Fans wondered why she'd shut down a harmless video. The answer, some said, was insecurity. Meghan reportedly hated the criticism she received for looking tired and gaunt at the show, and Martin's post reminded the world of it. The deletion became another sign of paranoia, another symbol of control. Even Martin, once fiercely loyal, quietly withdrew from the spotlight. And yet, the contradictions kept coming. Only weeks earlier, Meghan had stood on stage telling Fortune's audience that she'd spent her 5 years away from public life, barefoot in sweats and Birkenstocks like the rest of us. But photos from that same period showed her in designer gowns, filming home videos in $4,000 Carolina Herrera dresses. It wasn't the humility she described, it was the Markle myth, carefully rewritten for relatability. Her critics called it her greatest flaw, the inability to live her own narrative. Each time she tried to reinvent herself, she exposed another inconsistency. Every truth she told was soon undone by her own history. And perhaps that's what finally broke the illusion, that despite all the talk of authenticity and compassion, Meghan Markle's life had become a contradiction too big to hide. A woman who preaches empathy yet alienates friends, who demands privacy yet floods the press with photo ops, who condemns the royal system yet clings to the royal title that gives her relevance. Even her own family dynamics reflected that contradiction. Commentators pointed out that Harry's entire world now seemed to orbit Meghan, her friends, her projects, her causes. He had, they said, cut off his entire life to please his wife. Their children, shielded from public view, became symbols of secrecy rather than sanctuary. The fairy tale had twisted into something darker. Dependence disguised as devotion. And as rumors swirled that King Charles and Prince William were preparing to strip the Sussexes of their royal titles altogether, the public mood shifted. What was once scandalous now felt inevitable. She deserves it, one commentator said flatly. She's used that title as a weapon long enough. Because in the end, for all the glamour and all the grand speeches, Meghan's story had become less about reinvention and more about erosion, of trust, of credibility, of mystique. What began as a rebellion against royal control ended as an obsession with controlling every detail of her own fading brand. And somewhere between the fake tears, the photo ops, and the endless rebranding, the world stopped seeing a misunderstood duchess and started seeing something else entirely. By now, the Meghan Markle narrative had drifted far from the fairy tale that once captivated millions. The world was no longer seeing a radiant duchess forging her own destiny. It was watching a slow unraveling, a woman trapped in the very performance she built. Her public image, once carefully curated to inspire admiration, now drew skepticism and fatigue. The pattern was painfully predictable: a grand reappearance, a wave of criticism, then a hasty pivot to a new cause, a new speech, a new version of herself. Behind the curtain, even her staunchest defenders were beginning to waver. Meghan's need for control over her image, her story, and even the people around her had become impossible to ignore. She demanded absolute loyalty, but offered little in return. The fallout with Daniel Martin had already made headlines, but it wasn't an isolated case. Those who once saw her as a confidant or collaborator quietly drifted away, describing the same exhausting pattern. Everything was about Meghan. Every friendship, every alliance, every event, it had to serve her narrative, or it didn't last. And nowhere was that clearer than in her relationship with Harry. Once presented as a modern love story, a prince who gave up everything for his wife, it now looked like a partnership cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. Harry's friends had vanished, his royal ties were severed, and his life had shrunk to the narrow orbit of Meghan's world. Even commentators sympathetic to the couple began asking hard questions. Was this still love or simply loyalty to an illusion? The most telling sign came not from words, but from absence. Harry's father, King Charles, was said to be battling declining health, and yet there was no sign of his younger son returning home. No reconciliations, no visits, no olive branches. For a man who once defined himself by his devotion to family, Harry's silence was deafening. Critics didn't hesitate to draw parallels. The same man who turned his back on his grandparents in their final days was now repeating the pattern with his father. He'll regret it, one royal correspondent said bluntly. He already lives with regret about the Queen. He'll carry this one too. The tragedy, they argued, wasn't just that Harry had burned bridges. It was that he didn't seem to notice the ashes. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her public crusade, hosting panels, attending galas, delivering speeches about female empowerment that sounded eerily identical from one event to the next. The words were elegant, the delivery perfect, but something was missing: sincerity. Even those in her audience began to notice the hollowness behind the glamour. It's like she's giving a TED Talk about authenticity, one attendee whispered, without realizing she's lost hers. At the same time, the Hollywood world that once embraced her began to drift away. The Netflix executives who had once bet big on the Sussex brand were reportedly cooling off. Projects were stalled, deals quietly renegotiated, enthusiasm dimmed. The buzzword of Megxit had faded, replaced by a quieter, more damaging label: irrelevance. And yet, Meghan doubled down. She clung to her royal title, even as it became her biggest liability. Every appearance, every introduction still carried the Duchess of Sussex signature, even as her relationship with the royal family grew colder by the day. It was her last tether to prestige, and perhaps her last layer of protection against complete obscurity. For her critics, this was poetic justice. For years, they said, she had weaponized that title while denouncing the institution that gave it to her. Now, as King Charles and Prince William quietly discussed stripping it away, the irony was almost too rich to ignore. She deserves it, one commentator declared. She's built an empire out of royal victimhood. Now she can see what happens when the crown finally stops protecting her. And beneath the scandal, there was something almost tragic about it all. Meghan Markle had once been the embodiment of modern hope. A mixed-race American woman who married into one of the world's oldest monarchies, promising a new era of diversity and compassion. But somewhere along the way, the message gave way to marketing. The empathy turned into optics. The authenticity became performance. Even her words about simplicity and humility, about being barefoot and dyeing her own hair during lockdown, rang false against a backdrop of private jets, couture wardrobes, and million-dollar mansions. Each contradiction chipped away at the very image she had spent years perfecting. What was once seen as misunderstood ambition was now viewed as manipulation. Those who followed her rise could see the arc clearly. The actress who became a duchess, the duchess who became a celebrity, the celebrity who became a brand, and the brand that no longer knew what it stood for. Observers described it as a cycle of reinvention without reflection. She didn't pause to rebuild. She rebranded. She didn't listen to criticism. She outposted it. And in the end, every move she made only confirmed what people already suspected, that behind the speeches and symbolism, Meghan Markle had become a character in her own publicity machine. And Harry, he was fading into her shadow. Once the rebellious prince, now the silent partner. A man who traded a kingdom for California, only to find himself adrift in a world of PR and performance. Commentators warned that his isolation was becoming irreversible. The longer he stayed away from his roots, the less chance there was of ever finding his way back. Because this was no longer just about Meghan's brand, it was about their legacy. A legacy now defined not by their courage to break free, but by their inability to find peace outside the walls they escaped. By the time whispers began that Prince William intended to formally remove their royal titles, few were surprised. The fairy tale had reached its final act. The curtain was falling, not with applause, but with exhaustion. From fans, from critics, even from the royal family itself. And as that curtain closed, the image that remained was hauntingly familiar. Meghan Markle, perfectly lit, perfectly poised, one tear glistening under the camera's lens. Only this time, the world wasn't moved. It had seen the performance before,